Disney made Pinocchio iconic. Almost 100 years after the release of the classic animated film, generation upon generation have been imprinted with the image and iconography of the wooden puppet who becomes a boy and his supporting cast. But the story of Pinocchio is in the public domain, making it difficult for other filmmakers to put their unique spin on the character and his world. Or so you would think. UHF television in the 1980s was like the Wild West, a wonderland of the strange and unusual, just waiting to be discovered by the turn of the dial. The curiosities that were found on these stations were usually unearthed on a Saturday afternoon, cartoons finished, no one to play with, and unlimited time to waste. Of course, Thanksgiving could also be a time to stumble upon a hidden treasure. The aroma of turkey and mashed potatoes wafting from the kitchen as down in the basement you stopped on a cartoon that looked familiar, but wasn't.
Presenting the new adventures of Pinocchio.
Hello, and welcome to the Pop Culture Basement Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Jamison, and with me tonight for our first annual Unconventional Thanksgiving special is podcaster, author, and quite possibly the nicest human on the face of the earth, MICHAEL Lyons. Michael,
Wow.
welcome to the basement.
Man, what an introduction. Thank you for having me. And this is an honor to be here. And I'm excited. And yeah, happy Thanksgiving.
Yes, I'm very, very excited. I'm very excited for our first annual Thanksgiving episode. I'm
Yeah.
excited that it is an unconventional Thanksgiving episode because it's an unconventional pick for
Yeah.
Thanksgiving. And when I was thinking about doing a Thanksgiving episode, of course, your mind automatically goes to Charlie Brown, Mouse on the Mayflower. Although I will admit, thankfully, my wife does not listen to this podcast. She is a huge Mouse on the Mayflower fan. I myself am not. I kind of struggle every Thanksgiving when she gets me and my son and my daughter in front of the television to watch it. I was excited when she first told me she only had it on VHS because we don't have a VCR anymore. But I've found it on YouTube for her, and we do watch it every Thanksgiving. But no, we are not covering those Thanksgiving classics, and there are other Thanksgiving classics. Tonight on the podcast, we are covering Pinocchio in Outer Space. And when I said that title to my son before coming down here in the basement to record this podcast, he looked at me and said, "What? What's it about?" And I said to him, exactly what the title just said.
Yes.
Pinocchio in Outer Space.
Yeah. They promise what they deliver on what they promise in the title. For sure.
They do.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of these, it's almost like comic books. When you see the cover of a comic book and it's always this huge action scene because they want you to buy it off the well, back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, they wanted you to buy it off the newsstand. Then you
Yeah.
open the book and you say to yourself, where's that scene that I saw on the cover?
Right.
You can't say that with this movie. They do deliver on what they promise. It is
Yeah.
Pinocchio, and he is in outer space.
Yeah.
And I was excited to have you on, Michael, because one, and you'll give out your plugs later for your podcast, but Pencils Pixels, you are, and Disorder, you are someone you would be the first person I would think to go to for animation expertise.
Well, I appreciate that. I was excited when you said you wanted to cover this because, as we'll get into, I have memories of this as well from childhood. And I think childhood may have been the last time I watched this movie before watching it, over the past several weeks in preparation for this. So I had fun revisiting it.
Yeah, it was when you mentioned to me when we were talking about recording the episode and you mentioned, "Oh, I have a really good Thanksgiving story about this."
Yeah.
I thought you had read my mind because I have a really good Thanksgiving story
That's
about
so
this
funny. Yeah.
this movie also. So it's going to be interesting to get into that. But before that, since you are a first-time guest, I always ask my first-time guests, growing up, how did you consume your pop culture? Was there a special place in your house that you went to read, to watch TV, just to be alone with your thoughts? How did you consume pop culture while you were growing up?
I think I thank my parents for my love of pop culture. my mom and my dad were I guess they'd be the first television generation. They used to tell me stories of listening to radio, and then when television first came along, they used to tell me those stories in the 50s. And I remember my dad telling stories of getting his first color TV. And my dad has my memory because he even remembers when the television repairman came in and turned it on. Get Smart, the old TV show Get Smart was on, and my dad had never seen it in color before. But I consumed pop culture on that giant furniture-sized living room TV that my parents had sitting in front of it. And, I guess if my parents or our parents were the first television generation, then we were kind of the first rerun generation. Like they grew up with television, we grew up with television over and over and over again, and reruns of shows like Brady Bunch and The Honeymooners and Twilight Zone, like all my favorites, The Odd Couple, and getting to a point where you memorized the lines, So I thank that giant screen TV on our shag carpet in our living room for that with its big speakers on either side, and then the local movie theaters as well. I didn't grow up with VCRs. We bought our first VCR when I was in high school, so I didn't grow up with movies over and over again all that much. As a kid, I grew up going to see them in the theater. Local theaters, our local theater, Kings Park, where I grew up, Kings Park, New York. It was the second run movie theater, so the movies were $1 and they came like 6 months after they were out in theaters. So you saw the big Christmas movies during the summer, the big summer movies at Christmas. And then, as I've told multiple times on Disorder, there was the Mayfair movie theater in nearby Comac that showed the Disney Summer Film Festival, which for listeners of your podcast that may not have listened, there was a time for about 5 summers in the 70s where Disney broke with tradition of releasing their big animated movies every 5 to 8 years, and certain theaters would sign on to be a Disney Summer Film Festival theater. So from last week of June to Labor Day, which was summer vacation for all the kids in New York, there would be a different Disney double feature each week. One of the live action classic animated features. I'm sorry, one of the live action movies and one of the animated classic features. So a lot of the double features made sense, like Jungle Book and Swiss Family Robinson, and some of them were out of left field, like Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs and Blackbeard's Ghost. But because of that, I was very fortunate. Over those 5 summers, I saw every classic Disney animated feature in a theater, sometimes multiple times, with an audience and whatnot. And don't get me wrong, I'm very jealous of the current generation that can click on a tile on Disney Plus and watch whatever they want right now. But there was something special about definitely seeing them in the theater growing up. So yeah, my parents' big giant television that was the size of our couch, and the local movie theaters are where I consumed my pop culture growing up.
Yeah, I like that you bring up. This is going to be the part of the show where I sound like the curmudgeonly old man. There's always at least one point in the show where I sound like the curmudgeonly old man. Kids today, they do have it too easy. They don't realize it yet, but they do. They can go on Disney Plus, as you said, click on a tile, and they have thousands of movies at their disposal. I grew up in that same generation of watching reruns, the rerun generation,
Mm-hmm.
and coming home and watching MASH and seeing it out of order. Why does BJ have a mustache in this episode? He doesn't have a
Right.
mustache in the other
Yeah.
episode. Who's this
Yeah.
other guy they call Trapper? How come Colonel Potter isn't in this episode? There's another person who's in charge of the camp. I have already done an episode on this podcast of What's Happening, watching the What's Happening Doobie Brothers episode over and over. Who are the Doobie Brothers? Who's that guy with the beard?
Right. Right.
I think
Yeah.
that this song's
Yeah.
kind of cool, but why are they trying to tape the Doobie Brothers and why are they playing in a gym in a high school somewhere? So, yeah, you know what? We did have to work a little bit harder for our pop culture. But
Yeah.
I think because we did, we have memories of programs like the one that we're going to talk about today of
Yeah.
Pinocchio in Outer Space, because like I said in my long-winded introduction, and I apologize for making you and the listeners sit through that, uh, there were those days, and it didn't always have to be a Saturday, but for me, it always felt like a Saturday where the cartoons were over, you'd go outside to play because Wide World of Sports came on, and you knew that meant there were no more cartoons for that Saturday. So you're going out to
Yeah.
play. You're done playing, you come back inside, maybe it's 3:30, 4 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon. I had a brother, so you know what? We'd probably do something together, but maybe you don't, or maybe your brother wants to go do something else. What are you gonna do? I'd walk downstairs to my basement and I'd go watch TV. But as you said with a VCR, you didn't get a VCR until you were in high school. I didn't get cable TV until I was in high school.
Mm.
So I had the 3 network TV stations,
Mm-hmm.
and we had UHF. And we
Yep.
had, at one point, we had 3 UHF stations in Philadelphia. Then one went away, and we had 2 for most of my childhood. Then we did get a third again. You know, I guess that's it's the benefit of being in a top 5 market. But I that was one of I'd actually say one of my most cherished memories of growing up was just turning the dial, putting it on the U, because you
Yeah.
did put it on
Yeah.
the U for the UHF,
Yeah.
and I would go to where I grew up, it was channel 29 or channel 17, and on Saturdays, you would find the weirdest
Yeah.
things that would blow your mind. And I just think that discovery for kids today is gone. It was where I found Yellow Submarine before I knew who the Beatles were. It
Mm.
was where I found The Hobbit, the animated Hobbit,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
and got to sit down with my dad who had read all the Lord of the Rings books, and he explained to me what this was,
Huh.
and sat and watched it with my brother and I. It was where you would find the dubbed Hercules movies. Even
God. Yeah.
sometimes you would
Yeah.
put on you would put on, PBS, and there would be, "Why is there a strange curly-haired man with a scarf running around?" I had no idea what Doctor Who was.
Right. Right.
And it was the same thing as it was with reruns. Why is it at some point a strange curly-haired man with a scarf, and then sometimes it's a blonde young guy? So I think that is something that this generation doesn't have while they're just flicking through Instagram every morning on their phones and watching a
Hmm.
5-second video and then going to the next, is that joy of discovery
Yeah.
and joy of finding things that would stick with you. And as I said to Michael before we started recording, Pinocchio in Outer Space is a program that has stuck with me since I was a kid.
Hmm.
When I first went on to Amazon, it was one of the first things I looked for to see
Wow.
if I could buy it. And I didn't I think I just knew I probably just put Pinocchio Space because I didn't know that it was called Pinocchio in Outer Space. Maybe I did. It's the most simple of titles, so I should have realized it was that. And I found it and bought it, and that was the DVD that I watched this week before recording. Because it was one of those things that I thought that my mind had played. I thought it was the Mandela effect that, okay, did I
Right.
really see this?
Yeah.
Did I really see this when I was a kid? Was there Pinocchio and he was in a spaceship with a turtle? Was this real? Or did I have too many Flintstone vitamins and something was going on that day? So, how
Oh, it
did
was real.
you how did you discover Pinocchio in Outer Space?
So, this is where I get to the whole Thanksgiving connection
Good, good, because
that
I'm
we'll
gonna have a
talk.
Thanksgiving story after, but since you were the guest, go ahead, Michael.
Yeah.
I'm excited to hear this.
Growing up as a kid in the 70s, a lot of the local stations in New York and those UHF stations on Thanksgiving Day, Black Friday through the weekend, they would put on a lot of animated slash family films. And I think this was done for a variety of reasons. I think at that point, there weren't a lot of big Christmas movies. I mean, now there is there's a wealth of Christmas movies to choose from. I mean, just look the past 35 years, how many Christmas movies have come out. But it wasn't the case in the 70s. There were a lot of the classic movies like It's a Wonderful Life, Miracle on 34th Street, White Christmas, Christmas in Connecticut. But the local stations would try and save those for December because, again, something else that was different was the holiday season really didn't start until Thanksgiving weekend. It didn't start on November 1st, as it does now. So I guess knowing that the kids were home and off from school over that long weekend, they would try to pull from their library anything that was appropriate for kids, for families while they were home. And also at this time, the Disney movies were still being issued to movie theaters, so um, they had to go to these non-Disney animated movies that they could get the rights to. So there was one station out of New Jersey, WOR. Their tradition was they would show King Kong on Thanksgiving Day, and their ads were like, "After your turkey, go ape," and they would show King Kong in the afternoon. Um, there would be the other live action movies like March of the Wooden Soldiers with Laurel and Hardy, and The Adventures of Tom Thumb was a live action movie with I think it was Ray Harryhausen, or George Pal did the stop motion animation in it. And then there was this like flood of these animated movies, feature films, most of them from the 60s, at that point about 10 years old. A lot of the Hanna-Barbera ones, like A Man Called Flintstone and Hey There, It's Yogi Bear. There was one movie called, I believe it was called Mr. Magoo's 1001 Arabian Nights, which, much like Pinocchio in Outer Space, is exactly what it sounds like. It was a retelling of the Arabian Nights tale. Mr. Magoo had a supporting role. There was another one called Gay Paris, which was Chuck Jones, who did a lot for Warner Brothers and did The Grinch. He did that movie. It was kind of like an Aristocats type movie. And in that mix was Pinocchio in Outer Space. And I think when I was a kid, I discovered it halfway through one, like, Black Friday afternoon, hanging around the house on Thanksgiving weekend or that Saturday or Sunday. It was on. And then it was one that they just kept in circulation through the years over Thanksgiving weekend. And it was one that, I wound up, like those others, watching from beginning to end, because seeing a full-length animated film on anywhere, but especially on television, was a treat back then. It wasn't something that you really got to see because there weren't a lot of them being made. So yeah, I have a memory of Pinocchio in Outer Space as part of that Thanksgiving film festival, if you will, that showed up on the local stations. And like I said, I think probably Thanksgiving weekend 50 some odd years ago was the last time I watched this movie, until I watched it when you said we were going to talk about it for the episode tonight.
Well, I'm glad I was able to make you revisit it. I
Yeah.
feel good about that. My Thanksgiving story about Pinocchio in Outer Space is I was at my aunt's house, who lived 2 doors away from me. We always did Thanksgiving at my aunt's house because she was the one, and my grandmother who lived with her, who would cook for us. And that was the Italian side of the family. So we not only had turkey, but we had spaghetti and meatballs and
Oh
sausage,
man.
and it was great. I could
Yeah.
still smell it right now. It was awesome. It must have been the morning, because Thanksgiving was also a time that my dad and my uncle and my brother and I and my cousins would go downstairs in my aunt's basement and watch football. So it must have been the morning, because I remember being in my aunt's basement by myself, flicking through the channels, and at first seeing a weird Smurfs movie. I didn't understand why the Smurfs sounded different, and there was a blonde guy and and a taller, knight-looking guy on the program, and then I later learned that there was the Smurfs and the Magic Flute.
Mm-hmm.
After that came Pinocchio in Outer Space, and I just sat down because I was amazed, much like yourself, that one, we were getting a full animated movie that I could watch on television, and two, it had to be, I don't have an exact year, for me, it had to be the early to mid-80s that this occurred, and it was on one of our UHF channels, so it was probably something cheap that they were able to acquire and put on Thanksgiving, just because they had to fill up time. But this was also a time before reboots, or before, as I said in the intro, when I thought of Pinocchio, I thought of Walt Disney's Pinocchio. I had a certain idea of what Pinocchio should look like, what his world should look like, what the people in his world should look like. And this was so different from the Pinocchio that I was expecting that I was intrigued, and it made me sit down and watch it. And then as the years I don't remember it coming on again or ever seeing it again. And as the years went by, I started to doubt my own sanity and wondered if I'd actually seen it until I went on Amazon and found that it did exist and bought it. But it always stuck with me. Nerdle the Turtle
Uh,
always stuck with me. Nerdle Spaceship always stuck with me. And there's something about the type of animation that this employs, and this is gonna sound very strange, but I'll throw it out there. I don't even know how to describe what I'm trying to talk about, but something like, the animation for Pinocchio in Outer Space and also the animation for the Fleischer Superman
hmm.
always made me feel it it was very Noirish, if you get what I'm saying. It used a
Yeah,
lot of
I
dark
could see that.
colors,
Yeah.
and it was different than, especially for me growing up in the '80s, most of the cartoons I was used to that were bright and just loud and were I mean, they were advertisements for toys and for cereals, but it was very much a different type of animation, and it always made me feel a little uneasy while watching it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now rewatching it this week, I can appreciate the animation in Pinocchio in Outer Space a little bit more, and I'll ask you this, I think it's that it's not cheaply done,
No.
and I think there was care put into animating this movie. Um, but yeah, there was always that sense of unease, and that stayed with me all through the years. And when I did find it on Amazon, there was a part of me that said, "Okay, do I really wanna buy this?" It's almost like a not a bad memory from childhood, but how is this gonna make me feel when I watch
Right.
this? So I
Right.
had to buy it because I was like, "Okay, I have to see what's been living in the back of my head for all these years." So that was my Thanksgiving story. I do remember on a random Thanksgiving in the mid '80s, wandering down to my aunt's basement, turning on the television, and watching The Smurfs and the Magic Flute, going back upstairs because my aunt was putting out celery. I can remember going up and grabbing a couple pieces of celery, walking back downstairs, and Pinocchio in Outer Space was on and watching Pinocchio in Outer Space. And until I talked to you, I thought I was the only person in the world who actually knew that this movie existed. So I was very happy that somebody else was also aware of its existence.
Absolutely. That's a heck of a double feature too.
And yeah, I have not bought Smurfs and the Magic Flute yet, but it I I think it's available to stream on Amazon, but I might just have to buy it to complete the collection. That might be next Thanksgiving's Unconventional Thanksgiving episode is gonna be Smurfs and the
There you
Magic
go.
Flute. And I haven't watched that, much like you. That is something I haven't watched in, almost 40 years, so that will be an interesting watch.
Yeah, it always is to come back to something after all that time. You're basically seeing it for the first time, because it's been so long.
Yeah, and I think, it was distributed by Universal Pictures, but it was animated and produced by Bellvision, which is a Belgium
Yeah.
animation production house.
But it's really interesting. It's really interesting when you look this movie up, there's not a heck of a lot out there on it or about it.
No.
It's really what, Scott Hopkins, who I host Pencils to Pixels with, he calls lost media. Like this really is
Very much
lost
is, yes.
media. So that's just an interesting piece about the movie as well.
Yeah, with these, you always go to, or especially with something like this that I'd only really seen once and then watched again when I had bought it and then watched now, and something that is not very popular. I always jump onto Wikipedia, of course, to see, okay, what's it say on here? And like you
Yeah.
said, sure, it gives a cast list, and Arnold Stang, who does the voice of Nerdle
Yes.
the Turtle, who
Yeah.
is the Jiminy Cricket stand-in, he is the most famous of any of the voice actors. He was in It's a Mad, 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 Mad World. He's the voice of Top Cat. he's somebody that if you hear his voice, you will know the voice, even if you don't know the face, but you might know the face too. He's basically that guy from the 50s, 60s, and 70s. He
Yeah.
would pop up in a lot of comedies, and his voice would pop up on a lot of cartoons and commercials and other things. But other than a voice cast and a little background on the studios that produced it and the writers and directors, there's really not much else. There's not much to, which maybe is good because there's no controversy. You don't find out that the person who voiced Pinocchio later became a serial killer or anything like that. But
Right. Yeah, I actually had to go to I have this book edited by Jerry Beck, the animated movie guide. And they just I forget when it was last updated, early 2000s, and there was a writer Andrew Leal, and they have little reviews of each movie inside, and there's not much background about Pinocchio in Outer Space, and it's interesting what he says. I think kind of sums up the movie for anybody who would. I think anybody who loves animation, anyone who's interested in finding something that's lost of another time, anyone who is adventurous in what they watch would get a real kick out of this. But he says, how does he say it here? It's almost intentionally inaccessible. The terminally off-kilter movie is hard to assess and perhaps best enjoyed in the company of convivial friends rather than gaping confused children. Like, I think that might be the best way to sum up this movie. It's a good movie if you have friends who love movies, who like taking chances on movies, and like you have nostalgia for this movie. You say, we've got to sit down and watch this.
I always use my kids as a barometer of, okay, would I want to introduce them to this? And two, if I did, would they enjoy this? I don't know if my kids would enjoy it. I think they would stare at it, mouths a little bit agape, and say, "What is this?" It's so much a product of its time,
I was
which
just
makes it,
about to say that. Yep.
yeah, it makes it very, very interesting. It's early 60s, the space race,
Yep.
uh, and it's that interesting time in the 60s that, the 60s are the 60s. You think flower power and the Beatles and hippies, but the 60s didn't become the 60s until 66, 67. That's what everybody remembers. There is that time, even right before Kennedy, or right after Kennedy was elected, and right before the Beatles burst onto the scene in America, that time of Camelot and the space race, and that is right in the wheelhouse of this movie. And that's,
Yeah.
I always find it interesting when they do movies like this. They Pinocchio, for anybody, and there's most people who are listening to this probably have not seen this movie, does not look anything like the Pinocchio of the Disney movie. He has blonde hair.
Right.
He's basically, let's just say, Pinocchio is back up to his old tricks again as this movie begins. The Blue Fairy does kind of an exposition dump in the very beginning of the movie. She's helping her mother. I think it's her mother. They're
Yeah,
sitting
that's
on a
never really
cloud.
explained. Yeah.
Yes, they're sitting on the cloud, and as her mother is at an old timey, is at like a sewing wheel, and she's
Yep.
sewing, and the Blue Fairy is holding the is holding the fabric that she's sewing, and Nerdle the Turtle's rocket flies by, and for those of you who don't know who Nerdle the Turtle is, we will get to that. Flies by, and they kind of exposition dump that Pinocchio he was trying to be good. He was on the straight and narrow for a while, but fell back into his old naughty ways. So he has been turned back into a puppet again. He's still living with Pinocchio. I'm sorry, with Geppetto. They do not have Figaro in this movie. I think I've never, I'll admit, I've never read the original Pinocchio story. So was Figaro a creation of Disney?
That's a great question. It's been ages since I read the original and even read up on which characters were added. I want to say maybe Figaro and Cleo were in the original, just because Disney was very much about sticking close to the story, but I don't know that for sure. That's a really good question.
Pinocchio, now he has a dog. They have a dog, Fedora, which sounds, as I was
Yeah.
watching, I was like, "Wait a minute, okay, they have a dog named Fedora." It kinda sounds like not exactly, but Fedora, Figaro, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Pinocchio he has reverted back to his wa to his puppet ways, uh, but what I always find interesting in these movies is you can't really get you can't put your finger on the timeline that this is supposed to be. They have TVs, and they're talking
Right.
about the space race. They're watching newscasts about the space race, which I think is a really clever, also form of exposition. They have a newscaster who is speaking to different experts, and they go undersea to talk to an expert, and the newscaster, you see him
Yeah.
just sink down to the bottom of the ocean to talk
Yeah.
to talk to the undersea expert, and he's talking to, scientists and the like. But you can never put a finger on what the time period is because you're seeing the TV and rockets, but also the village still looks like it's, the 1800s, and
Yes,
Geppetto's
it
toy shop
does.
looks like
Yeah.
it's in the middle of the 1800s. Maybe they just, Geppetto just likes he likes that classic aesthetic, so
Right. He's never updated.
no. I do like the design of the blue fairy that,
Yeah.
I will say the designs, because as I mentioned, Pinocchio doesn't look anything like his Disney counterpart, but if you're gonna go different to do this and try to make this your own, I do enjoy the designs of Pinocchio, of the blue fairy, of Geppetto. I mean, I said earlier that I really like the animation. I do. It's not that different. It doesn't look like anime or anything like that. This was produced in Belgium. It was animated in Belgium. Uh, I mean, it has a familiar early '60s sort of quality, but I do still think that there is a spark of originality there with the designs, especially the outer space designs. And I will say that Nurdle's spaceship is very low key, but I always enjoyed the design of it. I always thought it was a
Hmm.
very cool design for him. And I keep bringing up Nurdle. Nurdle the turtle is the Jiminy Cricket stand-in for this movie. Again, is Jiminy Cricket a creation of the Disney movie? That I'm not sure of
No, Jiminy
either.
Cricket, I know, was in the original story
Okay.
by Collodi, not for very long in the
Okay.
story, and the Disney artists expanded him for the movie. Yeah.
And who maybe he's got to find a way to get to outer space. So possibly when they were writing this movie, they thought, okay, we don't want to have too many characters.
Yeah.
And we'll just have Nurdle as the stand-in for Jiminy Cricket. Maybe Jiminy left, and that's why Pinocchio went back to his naughty ways. He
There
didn't
you
have Jiminy
go.
Cricket there
He
to
lost his
hector
conscience. Yeah.
hector him into being good.
Yeah.
He could have at least cameoed at the part where I do always enjoy, and I feel like this is a '60s cartoon trope of the devil on the shoulder showing up. And
Yes.
when I was a kid, it would scare me because it seems like in every cartoon there was always a devil version of the main character popping up to try to push him into doing something naughty, and we get that also here with Pinocchio. So you think Jiminy Cricket could have he could have cameoed as the good conscience,
At least the
as
angel. Yeah.
but also a sign that this was the early '60s is the fox and the cat, which are characters that you can be familiar with from the original movie, but the cat in this one is a beatnik,
Yes. Yeah.
which I enjoyed very
Yeah.
much.
Yeah.
For early '60s, having him snapping his fingers and saying groovy, that's pretty ahead of its time, I would say.
Yeah. I think there was a lot that I think was very original about this movie that I had forgotten. I mean, you were just alluding to the fact that this is kind of a sequel slash kind of a remake of the original
Mhm.
Pinocchio. Um, it, the animation, while it's not the full lush animation that you would have seen in like Disney movies of the time, like Sleeping Beauty or 101 Dalmatians, it's definitely fuller than television animation was at the time. It's not limited animation, and yeah, it's a little bit darker in its like tone and its colors, but also it has that same. I always call it the like mid-century graphic look that was started with the UPA studio, United Productions of America studio, and like the Mr. Magoo cartoons, where uh, at this point animation was almost moving away from, let's not make things look realistic, let's make them look like they're actual drawings. Like, we are going to make these look like, graphic characters, rather than going for the illusion of life that you would have seen in the original Pinocchio, which there are some scenes in the original Pinocchio that really, the way that, the camera moves, and I'm talking about Disney's Pinocchio, the way the characters move, there's a lot of personality there. And by this point, animation was getting very graphic in its look and its tone. And this has that same look of the time, which I really love. I think it's just the memory of watching a lot of these shows and movies that looked this way. And yeah, I think they definitely captured something here that was all their own. It's funny because it is a product of its time, in that you can feel at times that they didn't have the budget of a big studio behind them. They didn't really have a story to fill out an hour and a half, so there's some scenes that feel like filler. But when I watch that now, it's so quaint that, to me, that's part of the movie's charm, you know?
Hmm. Yeah, and you're bringing up the animation. That's a great description of it. It is that very mid-century, you were saying, like Mr. Magoo, and I'm thinking now of watching those probably on a UHF channel, and it does kind of look like that, but like you said, it's not cheap. There's You could always tell in certain animated movies or specials where there'd be no background. There would
Right.
kind of be a splotch of color in the background, and the two characters standing there talking, and that's it. That's all you're
Yeah.
getting.
Yeah.
In this, you can see the creativity to it. It feels like a lived-in village that you see.
Hmm.
There are musical sequences where Pinocchio, and I actually I wasn't dreading the songs, but as I put it in, I kind of remembered, oh, that's right. There's a couple songs on this. I don't
Right.
know what it's going to be like. I actually thought the songs were very good.
Yeah.
They're very, very good.
Yeah.
And the sequence of Pinocchio walking to school, it's a goody good morning. It's a goody good morning was it was a fun sequence. And you see the birds flying around and he's walking through a forest. Again, it's not just a blob of color in the background. There's a certain life that is given to these scenes because you can tell that there was at least some money put into production. As you said, it's still a low budget. It's not Disney. It's not Disney's Pinocchio, which I
Right.
mean, not many things are for that time because it's
Right.
one of the greatest not only animated movies but movies ever made. But for something that was done on a vastly smaller budget, I'm sure there was still a lot of care put into it. I will touch on another point that you brought up. You can tell that yes, maybe with the songs, they had to find a way to fill out an hour and a half. There's not much story to this, and for 1964, 65, when this was being made and released, you didn't for kids, you were just gonna plop them in a Saturday matinee to watch this movie or plop them in front of a TV set to watch it. I don't think they were thinking about too much about the backgrounds of certain characters or what their
Right. Right.
motivations were. But us as distinguished critics of, the pop culture of the last 50 years, we have to, hit on the point that, "Come on, guys, like, give us a little meat to chew on. Let's go."
Yeah. Yeah. But I will be honest. Something that, like, I appreciate about the story is, um, it's a sequel, but it's kind of a remake, and they put a science fiction spin on things. So instead of Monstro the whale, there's Astro the whale, which is this space whale that flies around in outer space that Pinocchio has to go out and go to with Nerdle. Um, and like, the animation of the scenes with the whale in outer space are really like full animation. There's a scene where Pinocchio and Nerdle crash land on this planet, and there's these giant like crabs that
Sand
come out, or
crabs,
like
yes,
sand crabs that come out.
they crash land on Mars.
The Mars, right? And like that. First off, the very like 1960s graphic look of these giant sand crabs is so cool, and the fact that there's this big battle and they're trying to like keep away from the crabs, it's a really good action scene. Like, they put some nice originality and some really full animation into some of these sequences.
Yeah, the whole Mars sequence, I really enjoyed up until the end, and I'll get to that. I will say, Nerdle is a great sidekick.
Yeah,
I guess he's a sidekick. Pinocchio is always going to be the main character, so I guess he's a sidekick. I think Arnold Stang is very charming. I
yeah,
think he brings a humor, and he brings that. I almost said grittiness. I don't mean grittiness, but there's a type of that children's cartoon cynicism
yes,
that
yeah,
he brings to the character that is very charming and very endearing and makes him a fun character and makes him a memorable character. I will say Nerdle the Turtle has also stuck with me all these years. I put a post on social media today about covering this movie, and there are a few people who just got back to me and just said Nerdle. So that's he's been remembered.
that's
But
funny.
that whole the whole outer space and Mars when they first take off for their journey to Mars, and when they get to Mars, that whole sequence is, as you said, it's beautifully animated, and there is a feeling of like they do build the tension in that scene and give you something to look at with those mutated sand crabs.
Yeah, yeah,
The only thing that I was disappointed in is I was expecting more from the Mars sequence, and maybe that was they didn't have anything else. That they crash land on Mars. They're trying to find again. This is the sign of the times. They're looking at Nerdle is looking into strange reports of radiation
right.
and atomic energy, and they basically go to an underground cavern in Mars and see a huge device that is mutating animals that live on Mars, and they find a river because they do say I watched on the DVD they have uh they talked to one of the producers, and he says that
Huh.
they did speak to scientists, they did speak to experts about space travel at the time, about space travel and about Mars, because there was a cut introduction that is basically an advertisement for the American space program. And they
Wow.
talk about that they used telescopic images to base the animation on. Um, and they bring up in the movie that there's no water on Mars. There might not have ever been water on Mars. They don't know if there's life on Mars. They go to the underground cavern. They find a river running through it, and they also find more mutated animals, which was very cool. I thought was
Yeah,
also very cool. You see,
yeah,
and they start to it's almost like an animated Ray Harryhausen. We keep bringing up Ray Harryhausen on
yes,
this
yeah,
episode, but it's almost like an animated Ray Harryhausen movie with these animals fighting and Pinocchio and Nerdle trying to get away from these animals. I just expected more because they're also they're below an abandoned city on Mars that has been destroyed,
yeah.
and they don't find any life forms there except for all of these mutated animals. So, who built the device? Who mutated these animals? And they bring up, they say, well, maybe these animals are the only life here. Okay, well, how did they build? How did they build that city? Why is that city there? I have these unanswered questions. I need to know. They need to make a sequel to Pinocchio in Outer Space, is what I'm saying. So that was
I'm thinking it was a budgetary thing. It's like this is what we have the money for. We're doing this scene, and then we need to get the heck out of Dodge or out of Mars because we don't really have the money to do anymore. The
most
producer who
likely.
was interviewed, do you remember who it was? Was it Norm Prescott?
I think it was either could have possibly been Fred Ladd who also wrote it.
Got it.
And
Okay.
they're interesting too because he was one of the first people who introduced anime into America
Mm.
with Astro Boy.
And Norm Prescott, I know, started Filmation, who later went on to make
Yes,
He-Man
yes,
and are the Archies and, Groovy Ghoulies and all those really good shows.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Going back to Wikipedia, that was the most interesting stuff, was looking into the backgrounds of the writer and the producer because their tentacles kind of stretched out from the
Yeah.
60s into a lot of things that became really, really influential in the 70s and 80s. So maybe that's why,
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
something that could have been a throwaway, we got something that was actually memorable.
Yeah. No, I think because they knew what they were doing. Yeah.
After they take off from Mars, they do encounter Astro, and those scenes are great.
Yeah.
Astro, I love the design, and he is much like the sand crabs and the other animals on Mars fighting. He is a credible menace. You
Yeah.
get the sense of his menace as he's chasing them down, and they, of course, like you said, this is basically it's a soft reboot slash remake of the original Pinocchio. They fly into his stomach. They're trapped in there with a lot of space junk, but I like that too. And I thought that was a very cool animated sequence as they're just floating in his stomach, and you see
Yeah.
the remnants of all of that cool 60s type of space junk that had that very 60s aesthetic
Yeah.
uh, at that time. Yeah, very 60s sci-fi aesthetic, I would say.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. The film I think also has a good sense of humor, a lot of it coming from Arnold Stang at times in his comments. But you were talking about the scenes at the beginning where just randomly out of nowhere Geppetto has a television in his little cottage, and they see those first reports of Astro, or just the reporters reporting on these strange happenings. And that was like a few minutes of like real satire about television and news reporting. The reporter going down to the bottom of the ocean and the water. Like the movie, I think it's funny because you were talking about how the title is Pinocchio in Outer Space. You get what they're advertising, but I think they also had their tongue planted firmly in their cheek for a lot of this movie too. And there are scenes like that and a lot of Arnold Stang's lines that reflect that.
Yeah, they weren't talking down to the audience. It
No.
wasn't. We keep saying this, but this wasn't disposable entertainment, and I don't think that the producers and the animators thought of it in that way.
Hmm.
I don't think they, in their wildest dreams, thought that this was gonna be, you know what? Our Pinocchio is gonna be the Pinocchio that people remember now. I
Right.
don't think they had delusions of, maybe they did, but I don't think they had delusions of grandeur. But they obviously weren't treating this as something that was disposable. And maybe when we talk about discovering this on a random Saturday or on Thanksgiving on a UHF channel, it could come off as being disposable, but I don't think so because there are so many other things I must have watched during those years that I don't remember watching.
Right.
But as I keep bringing up, this was something that embedded itself in me and made me want to seek it out when I had the chance. So I think that speaks to their craft, I would say,
Yeah.
in creating something that, two people 50 and 40 years later can go into a podcast and talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's so funny because it's one of those moments of I'm always fascinated when you see an interview with a producer or a writer who worked on something so long ago and then they get asked these in-depth questions about it and you often wonder like in their mind are they thinking this was just a job like I was getting a paycheck, the movie was over, I moved on to the next project and now you're asking me about it how many years later.
Yeah, I think that's and it's the good and bad of all of us, especially fans, having access to all this and being able to express their opinions on social
Yeah.
media,
Yeah.
on podcasts. I think it's with a lot of actors. I listened to a podcast where they talk to the actor who played Igor on MASH, Jeff Maxwell.
Oh, wow.
It's called Mash Matters. He co-hosts it. And whenever they ask him questions about the show, he says, "You know what? I really was not paying attention." He said, "For me, it was just a job. I would go there and it would be cold in the morning and you'd be miserable because it was 5 o'clock in the morning and I had to be there and get up early and we sat there all day and we did our lines and I went home." He said as he's doing the podcast, he is watching the show more now than he ever did when he was on the show, because for him it was just a way to
Wow.
pay the bills.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I think
yeah,
that's right. I think there's a, it's always going to mean more to the fans. That's why they're fans.
yeah, yeah. I think it's also interesting how um, these pieces of pop culture that are created, whether it's a show like MASH or a movie like this, Pinocchio in Outer Space, how it gets so attached. They get so attached to memories, too, to people's personal memories. That's probably something that the creators, never envisioned happening.
Yeah, and that's what I think it loops back to what I said in the beginning. And I was half kidding when I talk about being an old curmudgeon, because you know what? My parents, when I was growing up and watching TV, were probably grumbling about however I was consuming pop culture. So, of course, my kids now are going to consume it in a different way. But it is, to me, as a kid of the I was born in the '70s, but, my formative years were the '80s. As a kid of the '80s who did come home from school and do my homework and then sit down, and I knew what shows were coming on at 5. I knew Three's Company was coming on. I knew What's Happening was coming on after that. I knew then I could watch MASH, and then I could watch Laverne and Shirley or Happy Days. And that's but these are the things that stick with you, and I wasn't exaggerating when I was saying on those Saturday afternoons when you were done playing or when it was raining outside and before you had cable TV and maybe you had a VCR, but you didn't own movies because movies cost $100 to buy. Maybe later that night you were gonna go rent something, but you didn't own 500 movies and you couldn't go online and download something you wanted to watch or watch something on YouTube. If you didn't wanna read, just wanted to watch TV, you had to find something that was gonna interest you, and there was always something weird and wonderful that you could discover on these stations that was out of the ordinary, but that you would never forget. And I think this is definitely a prime example of that.
Oh, absolutely, and very, very fortuitous. I think a good happenstance that we both have, similar Thanksgiving memories connected to them.
Yeah, when you first mentioned it, I thought to myself, I was thinking, "Oh, was this associated with Thanksgiving years ago, and maybe I just didn't know?" And so it was just it was it was crazy that was the first thing you wrote back to me was, "Hey, I have a really interesting Thanksgiving story to tell about this." And I just thought to myself, "Wait a minute, is he reading my mind? What is going on here? What's happening here?" But it's these type of shows that not only, I don't only have memories of the actual program, but as I described in the beginning, I have memories of being in my aunt and my grandmother's house. I have memories of them cooking upstairs while I was just wandering downstairs to put the TV on. I can really almost smell what the house smelled like, and I can taste that celery that I went upstairs to get to eat when I came back down to watch the show. So it's just these are the type of pop culture items that I hold dear to my heart because they do just elicit such a reaction. Even if it's good or bad, but they at least elicit a reaction, as we talked about earlier. It's not something that's just throwaway or something that you're gonna watch and just kind of stare with your mouth. Back then, you couldn't watch and flick through your phone while you were watching. You would
Right.
just stare, and your mind would wander off, and maybe a little bit of drool would form at the side of your mouth. But no, this was something that kind of made you sit up and pay attention and remember what it is. And I think that's what it's done for us.
Absolutely. I always say that there are movies and TV shows, even songs that are um, movies and TV shows and songs, and then there are some that are portals back in time. Sometimes, and I'm sure you feel this too. There'll be a movie on, a TV show on, and I won't even be watching it, but just the soundtrack or something is said. And to your point, you just take a trip back in time for a moment of, being down your aunt's basement or being in front of the giant screen TV that, the big, furniture sized TV that my parents owned. And, those are the best, I think. Sometimes it's not even the best movie, it's not even the best TV show, it's the best song. But for you, it is because of everything else that it means, you know?
Yeah, everybody has their own unique experience, and
Yeah.
with this podcast, I like to talk to other people, and I like to just get a little insight into their experiences, and I'm glad I got to talk to you tonight about this movie and hear about your experience with it.
Yeah, same. Thanks for having me on. This was a lot of fun to revisit it and take my own portal back in time while I was watching it again for the episode, and then to kind of revisit all these memories with you and hear about yours as well. This was great.
Yeah, thank you, and, yes, you were our inaugural guest on the the unconventional Thanksgiving special. So like as I said, I think the second annual will have the Smurfs and the Magic Flute. So I'm gonna have to get on buying that soon. But Michael, once again, I'm truly honored to have you on the show because I've said this to other people. Somebody who was a common friend of ours, Tim Rooney, and other
Yeah.
people who I've had on that I've been listening to you and your podcast with Andy and Scott for a long time. It was when I was thinking about doing podcasts, I kind of held them up and said, "Oh, if I can only do something as good as that and something as entertaining as that." So when you did say you'd come on, I was very excited, and as I said, I am honored that you would come on to the show and talk to me, and I hope you had a good time.
Oh, thank you again. The honor is mine. Your show's great. I've been listening to it. If you're a fan out there of any type of pop culture, you should listen to it. Your episode with Melissa about the John Candy documentary was really great, and you've had a few What's Happening episode. You've had some really great, fun flashback episodes that that I really love and bring back a lot of my own nostalgic memories. So I was honored to be asked, and thank you again for having me on.
Well, I appreciate that. We will be having Melissa on again. I am researching our Doctor Who episode right now, so hopefully that is going to be our Christmas. Well, it's actually going to be our my New Year's episode. I think. Hopefully, if if real life does not intrude on my podcast life. So fear
Very
not,
good.
Melissa will be on again, and I've given her more of a heads up than just a 2 minute. Hey, are you doing anything like I did last time? But until then, and I'll give you your $5 later for saying those nice things, Michael. Do you want to throw out there where the people in the podcastosphere can find you?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And thank you for letting me plug a few things. So, yeah, I'm on two podcasts. One of them we just concluded. We had our series finale of Disorder, Every Disney Film, which was a podcast I hosted with Andy DiGenova and Hunter Fagan. We started off reviewing each Disney animated film in chronological order, and we went through all of the animated films, and then we started doing kind of a potpourri of different Pixar movies, live action movies, other Disney animated movies. And we just wrapped that show up after a little over 8 years, but the episodes are still archived out there. And then the other podcast I currently host is From Pencils to Pixels, the Animation Celebration podcast with Scott Hopkins, where we look at a lot of nostalgic animation. We look at some newer animation, but not just from Disney, all the studios, Hanna-Barbera, Warner, Filmation, a lot of the studios we mentioned on this show, and a lot of random pieces of lost media like Pinocchio in Outer Space. We've talked about a lot of lost TV shows and movies on that podcast. And then for anything and everything me, you can head over to my website, wordsfromlions.com. That's lyons.com. And my articles are on there, my blog, and information on my two books, Disney's Drawn to Greatness, Disney's Animation Renaissance, and Magic Moments, Stories, Lessons, and Memories from a 20-year career at Walt Disney World. Information on the books is there, and you can also purchase the books on my site as well. So that's everything me. So thank you again. Happy Thanksgiving to you and everyone out there.
Yeah, I will say, and it's not because I am looking at Michael right now on camera on my laptop. Both of those books are amazing. I have read them. I gave both of them to my wife. I read them first, and then I gave them to her as as a birthday and a Christmas gift. So those are the best gifts, when I can read them and then say, hey, here you go, happy birthday.
Well,
They are
thank you for
great
that
books.
too.
They are great books. Seek them out. And Michael's podcast, Disorder, you have a good podcast waiting for you. I know it just finished up. I just got done listening to the final episode. There was not a dry eye in the house after I listened to it. You have something special waiting for you. If you're a Disney fan, even if you're not a Disney fan, if you're just a fan of fun podcasts, and the same from Pencils to Pixels with you and Scotty. If you're an animation fan or just a fan of great podcasts, check those out. Check out Michael's books. I don't have any books out, but I'm going to plug myself and just say look for Pop Culture Basement on Facebook. We are on Twitter, because I don't call it the other thing. And we are on Blue Sky. So just drop me a line. Let me know what you think of this episode or any of the other episodes, and let me know if you have any episode ideas. And I will second Michael's wishing of everyone to have a happy Thanksgiving and a happy holiday season. We will be back soon. And I will say, until we are back, you know what? Unplug your cable, unplug your computers, go outside, put an antenna on your house, get your son or a brother or a wife or a friend to help you move a TV that's the size of a Buick into your living room, turn it to the U, and try to find some media, some pop culture that may be a little bit weird, but you will probably not forget 40, 50, 60 years from now. But until then, thank you all for listening. Happy Thanksgiving. Michael, thank you again, and we will talk to you soon. Bye.